There is a phenomenon at the moment where younger people are starting to establish self-managed super funds. And one of the reasons people are looking into is the want to invest in crypto in the superannuation fund and other electronic assets as well. It's not just cryptocurrencies. Grant Abbott from LY Legal is with me to discuss this issue. How are you, Grant? Welcome. Great to see you as usual.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Darren, and particularly around crypto. Yeah, I put a couple of things on TikTok and obviously my YouTube channel, and the crypto is the one that everyone's loving at the moment because it's the flavor of the day. Now, first off, I haven't ever invested in crypto. I established the first ever deed that allowed crypto way back in 2009 because I that was when Bitcoin just first took off, and I could see that was a huge advantage, and a lot of people jumped in at that time. Maybe I should have jumped in that time. I would have done quite well. And then in 2019, I built the first ever crypto discretionary trust, which you can get through LY Legal or on Lightyear Docs. So crypto has its place, but we also have to remember it wasn't that many years ago. It was down at $6,000, so now it's up at 113. So everything goes through cycles. And I'll just tell you a little story. Is My dad way back in this is really old school. My dad in 1970 was lucky enough through my mum's cousin, who was a chief geologist for a company called South Australian Minerals. A lovely guy, and they were taken over by a company called Poseidon, and essentially for five Samen's shares or South Australian Minerals shares, you got one Poseidon share. So Dad's entry level cost in South Australian Minerals was 20 cents. So he ended up, he had I think something like 100,000 Poseidon shares, which was fantastic. And then Poseidon suddenly took off. If you go and have a look at the stats, if I remember, it went from virtually next to nothing to something like $300. And in those days, that was like huge. And so suddenly we were millionaires, and Dad was buying cars and blah, blah, blah. And he was going to sell some because we ended up moving over to the UK, but he got very, very bad tax advice saying that if he'd sold, it would have been caught under 25A, well, 25A, like profit making scheme or undertaking, because there was no capital gains tax in those days, which was a load of rubbish in the long run. So he held off. But by the time because he rang up the tax office, can you imagine ringing up the tax office for tax advice? My dad was a CEO of a large company. He was like, Dad, anyway. And they said, look, if you hold on to it for 2 years, you're going to be okay. So again, the tax office being very capricious and non-knowledgeable. So he held off, but by that stage, they'd gone down to $3. And unfortunately, he'd actually lent some money he didn't have to all his family to get into Poseidon when they were up around about 200, 280, 300. But anyway, look, but he did take some winnings along the way, and he made a couple of other really good investments, like in Computershare that took off. Everything has a cycle. I just tell people that if you're going into crypto and you've already got a really good profit, take some off the table now so that you've got a. Do you know what I mean? It's like I know you're a bit of a punter and I'm a bit of a punter as well. So, if you've got some winnings, take some stuff off the table and then put it back on. So that's not to say that I know anything about crypto. I'm just saying this is, when there's exuberance and stuff like that, because I do have some people who come to me and they say, "Oh, I've got some XRP and it's going to go to 20 or 30 million dollars," and I've got, "Well, how much you got now?" 150,000. So look, I'm not sure that's going to happen.
It's obviously a very volatile asset class,
Very,
and even the people who run crypto exchanges will admit that
yeah,
there's
absolutely.
high volatility, which is what you've been talking about, the price fluctuations. And unfortunately, no, I didn't get into crypto either. And interestingly, my dad was a little bit interested in it, but in the end, he thought it was maybe a little bit too risky. He was just going to put
Yeah,
a little bit of money into it. But I suppose when you're talking about an SMSF context, there are a lot of compliance issues that have
yeah.
probably offered some roadblocks or resistance to people going, full speed ahead at wanting to include these types of assets in their super funds. So, what are some of those issues, and have they been sorted out?
Yeah, well, as I said, I had the first ever deed way back in 2009. So the key component is when you're investing in something, it's quite risky. But bear in mind, there's people who do day trading in stocks inside SMSF, people who do option strategies, future strategies, which are pretty risky, or currency hedging. So the main thing is that when you go in, you need to have a look at your investment strategy, which is under 52B, 2F, and Regulation 409. And essentially, there is the trustees considered the risk involved in going cryptocurrency. On like docs, we've got an investment strategy that specifically covers cryptocurrency and gold for that matter as well. And it's a really detailed one, but it's very easy to go on and do it yourself. So as long as you're forewarned on that one as well. The other one is also being mindful of it's on an exchange or in a wallet, where that is, because you don't want to die. Imagine if you're a director, you die and you don't know where it is. So there needs to be that consideration. And again, I know there's a few, that will potentially come up in audits as well. If you put all your money into crypto, then there's obviously a risk you haven't diversified, which is part of the investment strategy. But if you're comfortable with that risk, then it's a-okay. Um, it is quite funny. The reverse side, and this is a really weird one. I had a I had a discussion with a pretty famous footballer that I'll tell you about off air. And anyway, I was talking to him about family wealth protection, and he didn't really understand that much. And when I told you the name, you'd understand why. But anyway, we went through, and anyway, the meeting wasn't going too well. And then I said, "Oh, do you have a self-managed super fund?" And this is a footballer, so he's in his mid-40s. And he said, "Oh, yeah." And I said, "How much you got in?" He got, I said, "Around about just two and a half." I said, "Oh, 250,000." He said, "No, 2.5 million." I'm going, "Oh my
Oh,
God."
wow.
I said, "Oh, okay." So I said, and this is when Bitcoin, he said it was primarily in Bitcoin when it was 90,000. I said, "You worried about 296." So this was in May of this year. He said, "Oh, no, no, that 296, that'll never come in. The government will never put that in place." I said, "Well, you're in a bit of strife, because if they do and it goes up, then essentially you're going to have to liquidate some of your crypto in order to pay, do that tax payment." He said, "No, no, it's never going to have an impact." But anyway, so that was quite a funny one. So people do really well out of it, but book that profit along the way. And then also it's not too bad inside a self-managed super fund protects you. And that's one of the areas there is surprising the industry or retail funds, particularly in their wrap style super funds, have never allowed crypto. So it's sort of pushing a lot more people, and investing in property is pushing a lot more people into self-managed, which I think is a good idea. Look, let's face it, if you're under 35, you've got 50 or $60,000. Do you mean you're going to work for the next 30 or 40 years? When's the best time to make a risky play? Would you say that that's the best time to actually risk? If you lose 90% of it, which I will go back to the .com era. You remember that time when it was the
Yes.
whole thing? I remember going into investment fund at that stage. It was going into international tech ventures, and I put $50,000 in, and I that was only a portion of my self-managed super fund, but I got nothing out of it, so it just collapsed. So, do you mean we've been through this cycle before? While it's top and frothy, it's not a bad idea to don't be like me, get out, because if it goes down, you're going to pick up a low value, because in the long run, the institutions are now starting to pick up on it, which sort of goes against I don't know how you feel, but the whole idea about crypto and all that was to get away from the man, fair currency and all that. Now you've got JP Morgans, and you've got, Donald Trump, and you've got all the governments now piling in on it. And, it's sort of gone the reverse circle. It's now that it's become mainstream.
Yeah, look, once once it was considered a serious asset class, and one that's not going away, that was probably
Yeah.
inevitable that that was
People
going
going to
to
make money
happen.
out of it.
And the philosophy around risk, it's not discussed enough, I think, with people entering the workforce, but really with regard to any superannuation fund, even the public offer ones, they should be choosing the aggressive option for that very point, is that
Absolutely.
without responsibilities and financial liabilities at that time, well, not significant ones anyway,
Yeah.
that's the time that they can do the real aggressive strategy and have it pay off. Now, Grant, you did mention, and you have mentioned often, estate planning strategies with this. And if we can combine that with the importance of how to store it,
Yeah.
with wallets and or on exchanges, it's really important though to get all of that sorted so that you know what the access to those assets is, not only for yourself, but if you pass away, then other
Yeah.
people who you would like your death benefits to go to, well, they need to access it as well, don't they? And if it's stored on a computer or on a USB that
Yeah,
you
I know.
lose, that's it, it's gone. So that's really
Yeah.
important, isn't it?
Yeah. So I've done, as I said, I'm always a technologist, so I always make sure my documentation is well in front of the track. As I said, 2009, I built the first one, investment strategy thereafter. 2019, I built the first ever through LY Legal Lightyear Docs, a will that's actually got a digital executor. So normally, like when you draft up a will, you've got your executor and stuff like that, but you might have your spouse who's got no idea. So you might have one of your children being a digital executor. So what you do is these are the assets I've got, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of that sort of stuff. And then you'll give them the information or put the information in where it is in a cold wallet or coin exchange or something. So that has to be disclosed somewhere. So it brings the front to mind, as you said, that yeah, oh look, we've got to do this. And we've got in our pack for self-managed super fund wills as well. That we also, particularly those people got their same investment strategy. We've got that sort of philosophy as well. So I don't go down the BDBN or the binding death benefit nomination. I find that they've been too heavily litigated. I prefer a SMSF will, which is a bit more tailored. I mean, if you can have tailoring, why wouldn't you do that? And that's part of that whole process. And I do know there's a couple of organisations. In fact, I had a chat with them just recently who they've sprung up and they look after that death side. So they'll take and they'll store all your cold wallet, and it's all on the blockchain so that they don't have access to it, but they have got all that information, which I think is a great, as things are developing from where it was in 2009, as you said, it's becoming more mainstream, more ideas are coming up out of the woodwork.
Okay, thanks, Grant. Thanks for sharing those thoughts.
My pleasure. Thanks for that, Darren.